podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
Peace, my brother. What's happening?
I'm doing great, and what have you. So today I wanted to, open the year or close the month, I suppose, with a step into, a concept, something we talk about in terms of global blackness. And I was enjoying the movies, or the first movie of the Small X, or first episode, the way it's structured on Amazon, Steve McQueen's Mangrove. And I wanted to add on with you about that, and then we're going to get to the great John Chaney. So, for context, for those, Mangrove is a film, and I would encourage you to go watch it if you're listening. It's a part of 5 films that Steve McQueen put together, created, capturing part of the life of the West Indian community in London. And that we often are very centered and I think appropriate so at times, but sometimes in a detrimental sense, on our own experience, sort of, as Black people in America, and we may, and our orientation to, depending on if you're not related to somebody from the Caribbean, like, oh yeah, Jamaicans, or Haitians, or the Trinidadians, or whatever. Like, I'm saying, it's sort of like somebody that shows up to your party at some point, but you may not know much about them or think of that experience, as a similar or same, part of your life or our world in terms of, the diaspora experience. And there's a lot that I don't know, and I admit to this, in terms of like the recent history of, the West Indian community, or, across the pond, so to speak. But I know there's a lot there. On the other hand, thing I do know is that there have been, it's been on your ass, hundreds of years of African people who have found their way, within the mix of things that go on in the UK. But very specifically, after World War II, there's a lot of folks who either served or worked in different industries related to war production, and they found themselves, over there. And due to the structure of colonialism, the same way it pushes and forces opportunity away, from the people, where they're located, or the place where those who wish to profit plan to make profit, folks find themselves having to venture far afield. So, and I think things that deserve a deeper look, like the Windrush generation, and people really understanding what that's about, and the general, the reality of how the different, now mostly in independent nation states, but previously colonial interests of the UK, were how the people were oriented or set up to, see, maybe I'll go overseas, or I can find work in London, but, or Manchester or Scotland or whatever, you name it, city over there, and that's Scotland's not a city.
Glasgow, right.
Borough, you name it. And then, it's very similar to, in many ways, to our experience sort of escaping the South at times, right? You escape the South because it's wild and violently oppressive. So you're like, I'm gonna try to see if I can make my way in Chicago or New York or Philly. You know what I'm saying? And then you find out they got their own, special flavor of racism waiting for you there too. With differing degrees of what you're going to experience based on, the long length of time history, those details. So that's my background. So the movie captures the story though. Uh, what's called the Mangrove Nine, and before we get into, I guess, more detail on that, what were some of your first thoughts just about the film, the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, just to add on, I think there is a America does a really good job of putting people in a box, right? On the one side, it makes you feel like everyone's talking to you. On the other hand, it gives you blinders, right? So we often and especially now, we receive so much information that's tailored to our personal perspectives, right? The model of Facebook is, who do you like? What do you like? And then how does someone sell your information to somebody else, right? To sell you what you like. So it reinforces what you like, right? Like, what do we see right now in media? It sells us stuff it tells us stuff to reinforce what we already know, what we already like. But we've also done that, in my estimation, in America with global blackness, right? Because of our unique experience, to what you spoke to, I think we often do see ourselves as the center of the universe if you ain't in Africa, you know what I mean? Or if you're not in South America or Brazil, right? Like, but even that, like, sometimes we fetishize those elements of blackness, right? Like, we'll go back here for like 2 weeks, but then never go back, right? Or we'll go to Brazil or the Dominican Republic or the black parts or the, largely African parts of Mexico for like fun, or just say, oh, they look like us. Like, kind of the Manuko Rashidi, Ishakamusha Barashango type. You know what I mean? Not on that type of time, because with respect to those ancestors and what they did and what they presented, that knowledge. But I'm saying you can just treat it as like, oh, there's black people over there too. Not thinking about the actual specific experience that black people are having. So I really respect Steve McQueen for kind of bringing that to the table and humanizing them. And humanizing and giving honor to their experience in ways that I think sometimes gets lost in our own television. Sometimes get lost in our own movies. Like I said to you earlier, oftentimes, either somebody's a super predator or somebody's mom lost their leg. You know what I mean? Like, or somebody lost a job. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, somebody struggling to get a job, and just, black life does not become normalized. We have these like sensational elements, or very true elements, some true elements, but sensationalized in the context of watching it. Where, to be honest, this is historical, but it's anything but sensationalized. It's what happened, right? And I know we're going to get into some of the specifics, but I just think really Steve McQueen does a really great job at that. As a director, you know what I mean? Bringing that to, I think, a really not seen part of that, that community. I will admit, as a person who is fairly into watching, British shows and things like that, after, going to London and seeing the variety of black experiences, you know what I mean? Meaning it was everything from dudes in tight sweatsuits. And for a lot of folks don't know, the tight sweatsuit phenomenon kind of started in Europe. It started in Paris and London, and we got it after them, right? So everybody wearing tight sweatpants with socks all high, and we didn't start that one. That's one trend in society that Americans did not start. That was started by the French, and then the London folks, you became known by wearing sweatsuits. Kind of like America in the 80s, but they kept it. You know what I mean?
Right, they didn't let go.
They didn't let go of it. They took it to a whole other level and found fashion houses making sweatsuits and shit. You know what I'm saying? So you had that all the way to going to hearing like jazz, all the way when I went to Brixton. And, I know we'll talk about the story where it takes place. But, Brixton being more like the second home of kind of that seminal black experience in London. Not the only one, but obviously, like we'll talk about Mangrove. But just like you just see just the different forms of experience. And I really appreciate the humanization of that, because in the humanization, you really show the strength, you really show the greatness, right? Sometimes it's not about having somebody just be above reproach. It's about seeing that in their everyday existence, there is greatness in that. So that's my kind of take just to start.
Yeah. So give a little more, but not to spill the whole story. Basically, the reality is the Mangrove was a eatery restaurant started by a brother named Frank Critchlow, who was a Trinidadian of, I guess, before he got to London,
Mm-hmm.
and Frank was trying to have business to serve food, to the neighborhood, and something that would not be unfamiliar to us. The police was sweating them like like a bad sweatshirt. You know what I'm saying, or old or old sweatband. Just all giving them trouble, and all of the criminalization of blackness that we sort of sometimes maybe mistakenly characterize being associated with the United States was also present. You know what I'm saying, within the culture of the UK, in terms of the assumption that if there's black people, there's drugs, prostitution, and something nefarious going on. You know what I mean? And so they harass, the man's business, and in the way it's depicted in the film, and I did a little research to read too. They get into that also, but for the community, it was a place you could go eat the community's food. You could go out to eat, you can have dinner, you could kick it, have fun. So in the process of this, through stuff, basically, after several raids and assaults on the business, in work with some with other community activists, particularly some of the folks who were leaders in the local Black Panther movement, in London. And I'll just name the 9 real quick, just so it's on the record. So we got Barbara Beast, Rupert Boyce, Frank Cricklow, Rodon, Gordon, Darcus Howe, Anthony Ennis, Alethea Jones, LaQuaint, I'm not 100% how to pronounce that, Rothwell Kentish, and Godfrey Millett. Now, the first thing I'm going to say, them is some names, Jack. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've grown up around folks from the West Indian community, so like some of those, like the darkest of the world, or no, aren't necessarily names that African, like we might do, like we ain't making too many Butches or
No, Butch's. You know what, guys? That's funny. Butch is a name that's like has been retired from the Black lexicon. I guess it was replaced by LaShawn and Raekwon, and
you know what I'm saying? What's the other word?
Capri.
You know what I'm saying? We don't have a lot of Edwards no more.
No, them names is like the names that people name you to be an adult. They ain't name you to be a kid, right? Like they think about who you gonna be when you're 40. Hey, Edgar. Oh, hey, what's up?
You come in the room, say that name, we gonna listen to what you got to say.
Right. No, you're right. Butchers and Edgars is definitely Butchers, Edgars, Marlene's. Ain't a whole bunch of them neither.
Oh man, I ain't seen Marlene in a minute. Right. So, and basically, there's a protest. In the protest, there ends up being a fracas with the police. Folks get arrested. First they drop the charges, then later they redo the charges and try to, basically try them for a riot and all and a fray, which was I don't totally understand. I know that one I'll say is that the British legal system is confusing. I don't totally know how it works. You know what I'm saying? But basically, the what you get to in the story in the movie is the process of the trial, the build up to that. And what happened to the group. The only spoiler alert I'll ask, just because you can find it in your own and tell you, they do end up beating the case, and it becomes the foundation really for the first time in British law of acknowledging that, yeah, there's racism. They definitely did a both sides kind of thing. Again, if you think that the nature of racism and its behavior is only American, taste the flavor. You know what I'm saying? Same bag where like, well, both sides have some things to work on. It's like, no, you are the one. I got shit to work on. I don't like you. Get you started fucking with me. I would have been cool if you left me alone.
Right.
But so let me got back, that. So I wanted to lay that part out. So the thing that I enjoy, watching the story is, the benefit. One of the things, rather not benefit, that I feel this society wants us to do is, as you mentioned, to really put us to get in that box and stay in that box. You know what I mean? To stay in our construct of like who's who and who may be our ally, who may be aligned similarly, who I should be building my connections with, and to make them as circumspect as possible, and not see and really just not really know a lot about what's happening to other people, right? So you can make up any story you want about what it means to be black in you know what I'm saying, in Notting Hill, as an American. You'd be like, oh no, nobody's got it like us. They did that. Those people, they were over there, but they were there going to Oxford and stuff. Like, you just make shit up.
Right.
And so then when somebody like Steve McQueen does a movie like, just like he did 12 Years a Slave, which, was a great movie. I'll never watch it again, but it was powerful telling of the story. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna watch it because shit's too sad, and I don't need that in my life no more. But I appreciate what he did with it, and the idea that the criticism would be, well, why is this British man, this British black dude doing this very African American story, right? But if you put it in the context of the time that happened, I would imagine in many ways for certain people, especially even the center person in 12 Years a Slave, their existence as someone who had in some way was outside, had at least a space outside of the chattel slavery system, but was trying to operate within a white colonial world. It's probably very similar to the of other people, that may be in his line or had connection to. The realities of the ideas that have seeded and grown into what they look like in America are very similar to how those ideas and concepts of racism have seeded and grown in the UK. So we're actually not that far apart, but we could convince ourselves that there's no way that they could understand what we're going through, and vice versa, right? But watching the movie, watching the way, and I enjoyed, actually, though, I thought it was dope in the movie, was like, people just trying to have a good time, like working folks, and that's your neighborhood bar or spot where y'all can go and, man, take your hat off, tell some jokes, play cards, the things that everyday people, want to and need to do to deal with the rest of whatever their life is. And that even that, similar to our own experience, is something that at any time, somebody can come and fuck with you about it. And I think that it's good to see that story and that kind of, but it's also just fun to see that world, right? And get a slice of like, okay, this might have been if I had if I teenage, I don't know, I guess this is 70, so I wasn't born yet, but I was born in 76. But I'm saying if Justice Child, that me and my moms, we had a cousin in London in the 80s, I'm saying, this might have been what it would have been like, I'm saying, I went over there and seen, I was like, okay, they got the carnival going, I'm saying, people are dancing and playing reggae and then the toots and my towels and whatever, I'm saying, like, all right, man, I'm with this, like, I can rock with y'all. And so that was some of my thoughts in the story. What was something that you took away, or was thinking as you on that level?
Well, one of the things I got out of it was it showed the complexity of community. Like, he was politicized, he was not political, right? Now, in the new world, everything is political, right? But in the context of what he was trying to do was make fish curry for other Trinidadians and other West Indians, quote unquote, who were there, right, of that generation. Because you figure this is like 60, 970, right? Something like that. So this is the Windrush generation, right? Windrush was 48 to 71 or something like that. So all these folks that we're talking about are of this generation. And even though they're, kind of evolving to what it means to live, especially in London, because some of the earliest black folks that were there were actually up in Manchester by the industrial stuff. So when I did some research to find out that they're just like almost like Canada, like it's a lot of black folks in Toronto, but the black folks that was in Canada first, obviously, was the folks who, were avoiding the slave camps and slavery, right? So they went up into the north, the east, part of Canada, Halifax and St. John. Yeah. So in the same way, black folks was in Manchester and all that first. Then London was later, especially as, again, post-war in the port and everything like that, right? So, but you just see, he just wanted to run a restaurant. And at first, it's kind of like, he's like, no, man, let me just clean my joint up. Just leave me alone. Let me just get back to my business, right? Before he starts to recognize that, no, man, the fix is in. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then he becomes politicized, but he was not political. So while there was again, this idea of all that was going on around him and his community, he was not being political. But he was brought into it because of the nature of that. So I think they handled that very well, right? They handled that conversation of how does someone become politicized? How does someone become dedicated to voting, dedicated to act in a way to clear their name, dedicated to do what they got to do to be seen as who they are and fight for that fairness and that space. Again, with the benefit of, folks who were already fighting in that sense, the whole thing of C.L.R. James and that influence is, present, you know what I mean? And I think that's a really important component of this, of that show as well. Just the other things of the other forms of thought that were converging on just being black in Britain, which again is very similar to sometimes being black anywhere could mean a variety of things. It doesn't mean everyone's for the cause. It doesn't mean everyone ain't for the cause. It means that people exist where they are and they fall on a spectrum and they can be moved on a spectrum. So I thought that was really good. Another thing to actually see not only the, kind of Black Panther element, which obviously was taken in, people do forget too that they were Black Panthers. And the Black Panther Party was at one point an international party, which I think for us, if you put it in context of when you something's international now, you'd be like, well, what's international? Maybe Wu-Tang, Dipset, you know what I mean? Like something's international versus the Black Panther Party was in England, was in France, was in Africa, was in, the Dalits in India. You know what I mean? Just the influence of the power of those things being seen in those ideas, but them being put in a British context to me was important. Because they weren't fighting American issues, they were fighting British issues.
Right. And I think it's important for both because we can mischaracterize, the larger vision in the other Black Panther Party, from a political, from the vision of how you trying to change it, create a different political order, that it can't just operate within the conversation of just the land you're in. It has to be a larger vision of this is how we think things should run, right? And so the Black Panther Party, and that actually the role that international support actually played in the effectiveness and the operations of the Black Panther Party. But that's for a deeper study for those that have not done that work. And I thought that it was ill too, and what I enjoyed is that he doesn't, the movie, for the sake one, it's a movie and a good story. You can't go off in all the different threads of different folks' origin, but the one sister, I think it's Barbara Beast, who it's shared that she is either a descendant of maybe somebody that had a baby, like a mixed family, right? And, the child or someone maybe the father was a worker or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, but you get this she was taken from the state and she has this very specific experience due to her blackness that she's had to endure I mean, that's not the same as other people, but they're there together still, right? Like that you got people from different lands, and then people differently situated. Like CLR James, he's like a scholar or whatever, and then you got other people that are very learned. You got the people that look, I'm just a working person. You know what I'm saying? And so there's a complexity in the way the community is presented that is, you know, I, I think is always present, but sometimes in the way we currently approach these conversations about change and what needs to happen, we can get into a place where I feel that we start to separate people's authority or right to be in the conversation by what we think about their origin in the situation, i.e., oh, if you maybe come from a more economically privileged situation or what we perceive to be economically privileged, maybe we don't talk to you as much, or if uh, your ideas around change are maybe not centered, as much on, a certain level of activism or protest, or if they're overly on the business side, or, whatever you land in the mix of the blackness, that we're not maybe considering your ideas, as legitimate, or we're at least experiencing the tension of that. And I think that it's good for people to see and to think about that at every time in our existence, human existence, you got people with different pathways that they came together, and why they're there. Especially, I guess, in our modern world, where, humans been around for a long time. Maybe 2 million years ago, it was only your village and the other village, on the other side of the
Right,
hill.
right,
But
right.
there was a third village. We heard there's a third village down by the river. We ain't really been over there though. You know what I'm saying? Like, like that. At this point in time, if 10 black people are in a room talking about doing some kind of work, they probably got you know many hundreds of threads of origin, you know what I'm saying, that are feeding into that room, and like why they're there and how they're there, what they think is the best way to go, and what things they may agree and disagree on will surprise even the people in the room. So I thought it was interesting, in terms of the story, to be like, man, I wonder what's sisters, bro, what's the experience of kids like her in the foster, I think in the foster system, which they had a specific word. I don't know if that was the right word. Yeah, I mean, in there, and then I can just imagine. I mean, it's mad as crazy as it is sometimes being, you was the only black person around a bunch of white folks who didn't know shit about white folks. I mean, about black people, and
Hmm.
hated. That shit's got to be fucking terrifying.
Right.
I have, much love for the system, man. I hope that, she'll be able to find peace of wellness. You know what I'm saying? And uh, the closing thought I had on it, and my intent is, one, it was fun. Like when the court scene, when my man takes homie to the rack. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to spoil it for those that ain't seen it. Um, the the overall piece, it's always good for me, at least, to sometimes watch, a movie with black people where black people are their own hero.
Mm.
Like other people ain't like white people. Other people can help and they can be in the mix. Like, but we got a lot. In America, every movie they find a way to be like, we need a white hero in here to help this black guy. Like, how can we do this? It's like, I mean, and then not to say that ain't white people that support and help. I mean, in terms of issues that relate to historical, the justice struggle for justice, so to speak. But the structure of stories where black people can't be their own hero in their own story is just ridiculous. So I really enjoy, that aspect too.
No, I think so. I think you make a really good point of like people fighting for their freedom, and again, like fighting for things that were important to them and making them a hero was still normalizing it. Like go back and do your business. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like he didn't become like a national leader in Britain.
Right. He's like, oh, I just kept making curry and
Right. I went back to making curry. Like, you know what I mean? Because that was, again, dehumanizing the experience. And I think, I know we'll discuss some of the other ones, but I think it's a really good introduction into the Small Act series, a really good way for people to kind of begin to engage the complexities of stuff differently than what we may personally experience here, and what I would argue other parts of the English speaking and other language speaking parts of the world also experience. So if you're in Canada, you probably experience a lot like that as much as it was like, the States, if not more, frankly. Right? Like when we used to go to Canada, before, as we talk about like nigga imperialism, you know what I mean? Like you could tell that it was just a different place. Like it wasn't like the States. You know what I mean? They had neighborhoods that were challenging, but it just wasn't like that. So it's like, there are, black folks in Australia, because there are black folks in Australia, and not just, the indigenous people of Australia. You know what I mean? Like, there are people brought from the African diaspora to Australia. Mm-hmm. There are people who are there willingly, right? So, we kind of just have to get a global perspective. The whole concept of 196,940,000 square miles really being your, the total square miles of the planet, and really thinking about seeing yourself in that context, not seeing yourself as limited to the, kind of American, and especially the contemporary American perspective of blackness. So,
before we pivot, I'll say we're going to work through, as the tip of the hat to both blackness, work through, make a little space over the next couple months to talk about some of the other films in the series. And as the world opens up, and we, be able to travel, you know what I'm saying, to London get out of the United States for a week or something.
Yeah, man. As long as, listen, man, all y'all just stop going to, Punta Cana, to stop going to the Dominican Republic, man. Stop going to these places, man, so we can, really go places. I know the UK got the UK variant, but we don't know what that means yet.
Listen, man, we gotta do this. We gotta beat this thing, man. We're gonna go outside. So, and I think it's very important that we do this. So yesterday, prior to this recording, John Chaney, great NBA coach, or not NBA coach, but coach in my head. I'm thinking all the players he put in the NBA.
Right.
But great college basketball coach. I did not know as much till later. Great player himself in his time. And definitely the anchor of our age, especially growing up, you in Philly and me across the river, prominent, similar to when we spoke on John Chaney, public black man, you know what I'm saying, that had something to say and had an expectation. But John Chaney passed yesterday, and I wanted to make some time to add on about, the great John Chaney. So,
yeah,
what would be something that you feel folks should know? Like, what's something that you want to share?
Oh man, it's like I shared with somebody. Like, for the most part, when everything be happening, and it'd be like, we spend a lot of time, sometimes memorializing people that we don't know, and that's fine. That's not a judgment. That's just kind of how it is. Or people who aren't in your immediate circle for a variety of reasons, because they touched you in different ways. The John Chaney one is tough because, as I said, if you've been involved with basketball at any level in Philadelphia or the Delaware Valley region over the last 60 years, John Chaney has been a part of your life. Like, there's no other way to say it. I mean, his legacy looms so large, and for someone like me in particular, from playing Sunny Hill League basketball, which is a youth basketball league in the Delaware Valley region. It's not just in Philadelphia, because definitely had South Jersey teams. We had Montgomery County teams, Chester teams, things like that. And then they had Sonny Hill and John Chaney had a basketball camp together where, folks again from all over the region. And as far as DC, the AC dudes would come, this was really before the AAU thing blew up, right? So there's a part of the culture, and I think it comes with like the John Chaney element as well. There's a part of the culture of basketball where, now everything is like you've seen the best 14-year-old already, right? This is like a good 14-year-old in America. You've already seen him play. Mm-hmm. Then it was like you just had to hear about people on like summer camps, Baltimore, Washington games, New York, Philadelphia games, when people would come from different cities for tournaments. Like that's how you heard about people. And it wasn't as like flashy. It was how do people prove and earn their game. And John Chaney, like even at the camp, that's what they taught. They taught like hard-nosed basketball, defense first. Your head got to be in the game more than anything else is in the game. Develop your head as much as you develop your talent, because he knew that developing your head was the key to your talent. And then I had a family friend who was, we were fortunate enough to like get tickets to go see games and even see coach at certain times. Like we would go to the basketball, me and my pop would go to the basketball office and he'd be in the office or whatever, get to hear him talk about school and the importance of stuff. And you know what I mean? So yeah, just as a, one of dudes I grew up with, Akbar, really good dude, still in Philly. He talked about John Chaney as a black male educator. And I think it's important to put him in that framework. Like, I think it's one thing to say, obviously, and I'll go to this in a second, but obviously for what he did for Temple, right? And what he did for the, 5, Elite Eights, right? And if you look at the teams that beat him in the Elite Eight, except for like one team, it was like Duke, North Carolina, you know what I mean? Like
Fab Five,
yeah. Like these teams were beaten by teams that either went on to win or were like number 1, number 2 teams in the country. So he didn't take, like, he didn't get the blue chippers, because the blue chippers in Philly started going to, Villanova, or teams would come in and try to poach the guys, because it wasn't about getting up at 5:30 in the damn morning and running laps, right? But he was a black male educator. Just like John Thompson was a black male educator. You know what I mean? So I just think, it can't be understated the role and impact of John Chaney. And like I said, in my life, and even then going to school by Temple, us playing basketball games at Temple, the Summer League, and all those kind of things, like just that culture of gritty, hard-nosed, what some would call Philadelphia basketball. But then as an extension, what does it mean to like apply those things to your life? And what does it mean as black men to apply those things to your life and have somebody there that's got your back, that wants you in school, that wants you to graduate, right? Some of them guys in the other schools didn't care as much about people graduating. Yeah. And still don't. You know what I'm saying? But John Chaney cared about people graduating. He cared about people being successful. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think it's a huge loss and a time that many of us have forgotten about. I put, George Raveling, John Chaney, and John Thompson just in a different category. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They just belong in a different category when it comes to being pioneers. But like I said, for John Chaney, in particular for this conversation, because we talked about John Thompson, who did much of the same for his city, right? For John Chaney did it for Philly. John Thompson did it for DC, right? Born and raised in these places. And they loved and served them places until they died, right? Yep. As men, they loved and served them places, which is really powerful if you think about it. They were able to use heightened positions of power to influence dialogue. But John Chaney, particularly from coaching Gratz to then taking on Gratz players like Aaron McKee, to then a Gratz player like Aaron McKee eventually becoming the coach of Temple, right? Like where does that happen? You know, that happens with the influence of a John Chaney, with the thousands of kids who came through the camps, the thousands of young people that were exposed to him, and the thousands of people who were exposed to people who were exposed to him. Like I said, my man, I mean, talked about, like, you know what I'm saying? Because of the power of someone dedicating themselves to making sure that black males make it. And, you know, we have an industry around that now, right? Mm-hmm. So it's different when people just did it from whatever position they lived in, right? From whatever their positionality, right? As we talk about. Like, if my positionality is as a coach, well, that's my way of trying to save black boys. If my position is as a mechanic, that's my position. You know what I mean? So yeah.
You know, and I was, I mean, I guess in many ways, you know, I wasn't expecting it, but I was, you know, prepared for the idea, you know, and I didn't remember, you know, how old John was, and I knew, you know, he was, you know, close. I knew he was up there. But the first thing I just thought about was that he advocated such a commitment to defense and, like, you know, a certain ethic in terms of playing hard, like a focus. You know what I mean? Like, it was clear there was an expectation, and that whole idea that like you didn't just have to be good, you had to be really good, and that you got good by working at it. I mean, you got good by fighting, you know, through, like, you know, sort of the idea, like, you know, as I like to call it, you know, now we got all these different complex modalities about fitness and stuff. And it was an old way of being like, yo, you know what you got to do? You got to get up early in the morning. You got to do a whole lot of working out.
Right.
You gotta be dedicated to that. If you ain't gonna be dedicated to that, then you ain't gonna win. So, you know what I mean? Like, that it was clear too, you know what I mean, that that it at least appeared to me from a distance that John was, it was as much about, like, again, getting guys into college, not like just so he could become a famous basketball coach, so to speak, or right, that he could win championships, but it was like, this is a vehicle by which I can help these young men can use something that they're good at and that they enjoy to get these other benefits out of life. You know what I'm saying? And that, you know, yeah, some of these dudes, or this is you going to college, dog. Like, ain't no going to the league or some next level. Like, you going to college, and you're going to be, you know, this is going to be a bridge or a way for you to get to other things that you want out of your life. And I have a responsibility to help you do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that right, is my priority. My priority is, you know, it's great to, you know, you play games to win them. You know what I'm saying? As Herm, you know what I'm saying? Like, we play to win the game, but along the way, like, you know, who you are as a person should be developing. That this should not just be you know, these young men's lives. It should not just be this sort of fodder for my own advancement. You know what I mean? And I think that, you know, the stakes and everything have elevated from the age in which, you know, men like John Chaney and John Thompson and Coach Raveling, like, emerged in terms right, of what's on the other side of it now. But you know, I still hear and folks echo in youth sports and anything at all. We're going to connect with youth through the game. You know what I mean? And that's still there. I wonder sometimes the level of commitment to being like an educator, a coach, you know, kind of a fixture in a society, you know, or in a community, the way that he was and others of that time were. It feel like the strategy or the assumed strategy has changed in some way. So sometimes even if a brother's a great coach and does good work, it's sort of like, I'm coaching this to go do the next coach. You know what I'm saying? It's not to be the John Chaney. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And it's not to be John Thompson, right? Coach, yeah, one, like, you know, I mean, John Chaney coached at Cheney, which I want to get to in a minute. But you coach at Temple for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And coach at Georgetown, I came here to coach. I came here to do something very specific, right? And I'm going to continue to do the thing I'm doing here because I want to be successful. And to your point, I think rightly so that there's been attention and resources given. As part of my work, manage the MBK work is in my office. So obviously the talk around the conversation around Black men and boys and having resources put towards that is important. But I think sometimes when things become an industry, we assume they're being done better.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always think they're being done better because it became an industry.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it just gave long overdue payment to people who were working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I just think that that's one of the challenges of, do we assume because it's been accepted in systems that it's now being done more innovatively, it's now being done more effectively, and what are the outcomes? I mean, I would, if you take someone like John Chaney, you can put his outcomes up against anybody. You take John Thompson's outcomes against anybody, right? Like, this is not so it's like, are we being better at doing the work than John Chaney and John Thompson and George Raveling today because we have an industry around it? And what are the keys of what they did that are instructive for us to remember, that are still important? Because a lot of young people still see sports as their path versus, and I mean, understandably, but it's their path versus also their rites of passage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? In its best, sports is a rites of passage by which to learn a set of things and skills and relationships to the world, right? And whatever sport you're doing or whatever hobby you're doing, there are skills there that can help you understand the broader world. And that coach or that mentor, the role is to help fulfill that, give exposure to that, help you see different pathways based on the rites of passage. So I just think there's something again about being a Black male educator and a leader. There's just something there. I mean, standing up for, Prop 48. I mean, we don't even talk about Prop 48 stuff. Most people don't stay in college long enough to worry about Prop 48, right? But just the idea of like certain folks they're not passing one test well and can't play basketball.
Yeah.
But being, not being taught and not being taught to the test for 5 or 6 years, like other schools and stuff may do. And then they don't pass the test.
Right.
And then you're stopping them from either taking care of their families or, going on to take care of their families again. Today, most people just like, all right, I'm just going to go to the school for a year, which is that weird thing now that like all the teams that are good in college basketball are teams that never were really good. Generally speaking,
mm-hmm.
Like Gonzaga has been good for a minute, but I'm saying like Baylor now, right? Like there are teams that just because no one stays, everyone stays for a year.
Yeah.
So if you're staying for a year, the hell does it mean if you go to Duke or Baylor or the Ohio State University? It doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, you in and out.
Yeah, you're in and out.
And I think it's very important to highlight with that because the thing that he was being an advocate for is that and this is something that happens a lot, sort of, and folks thinking like, oh, we're gonna put this rule in, it's gonna make it like make it more rigorous and that'll make it that then whoever will have to work harder or something, and it's like, well, no, what you actually have created now is a young man who and other young people, because these concepts were not just about young men in athletics. Who had ability and drive, but maybe just hadn't had enough experience, and needs a little more time. But if we can get them in here, we can work with them. They can start the stuff that they can start in college. You know what I'm saying? And then they can catch up. I mean, ultimately, everyone, just so great that you got a high score on your test. Ultimately, it means nothing if you don't actually learn how to be a high quality human and engage with people. You know what I'm saying, in a respectful and healthy, right? Like you don't learn some actual skills,
right?
Like I don't care what you got on your SAT, ACT, or none of that. You know what I'm saying? None of that is evidence to me of who you are. Who you are is how you behave, who you be in real time. And our community is always known that, tests are great, can be important, but tests also don't tell the truth about us. And sometimes, especially those that operate in education and the learning environment that a college is like, look, no, let me get her in here. Let me get him in here because I'm sure they can do it once they get in the building, right? And they need support and they need people to back them up. Yeah, maybe their grammar skills or whatever, or the way they test doesn't point to the things that you think need to be there. But I
Right.
know our people. I know our kids.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and other evidence and other things, let us know that the most important factor in graduating college is just having the resources to make it through. But
Mm-hmm.
that and those being real in terms of the cost and the things, and then more ethereal in terms of the support system and the network. And these are like, people could mischaracterize like him fighting what those sort of ideas, those rules were doing, but the intent of those rules, as I saw it, was, to sort of make it harder for people to get into college basketball and get into college sports, and to penalize, programs, that, I guess the idea, I remember at the time, was they were pitching that it was so that those people who didn't really care about if you graduated or not, they couldn't get you in there and railroad you. You know what I mean?
Right.
But the other side of that was then those people that did care, which were probably a lot more, that needed that space to be like, yeah, let me get her or him, let me get that one over here, and then we'll work with them. We'll get them through, we'll get them in, we'll get them caught up. By the time they get to their junior year, they're going to be ready, they're going to be cooking. You know what I'm saying? Right now, they're going to struggle, but on the other end, they're going to be great. And I think, I hope that folks really go, will ponder about that, because that is a very important aspect of public policy, of rules, and that we sometimes will do things thinking we're stopping, a certain harm, but create a whole nother set of challenges and obstacles for those that are actually, that need the help or are trying to do their own, trying to help themselves. Can you speak on, because I think, I don't want us to lose it. Before, coach at Temple, he was coach at Cheney State.
That's right.
Great Cheney State. Historic black college in the Delaware Valley. And what is that? Is the geographical determination for where Cheney sits?
Half of it's in. Half of it's in Chester County, half of it's in Delaware County.
County, right?
Yeah, so it's weird. It's literally on the county line. Like there's a street county line that's on the county line.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it like in the context, like, when something gets gentrified, they'll like start calling it the something foothills or some geographical description you ain't never heard before. But I guess it is in some hills. I just wonder. I remember being riding out to Cheney with my aunt, and you would go, before the Blue Route. Blue Route.
Shout out to Blue Route 476.
Blue Route.
Yeah.
Blue Route. You know what I mean? But you would go, and it was like some twists and turns, because you would go through Philly, and then you would go like off road, and it was like some hills and mountains, trees, and then it would be like Cheney.
Yeah.
As I remember it.
No, it's definitely definitely in the sticks. Like, you ain't gonna get there on accident. That's one thing I'll say. There's no such thing as getting to Cheney on accident.
Yeah. And so but for 10 years, 10 years?
Yeah. So I think 74 to about 8-9 years, because I think it's 74 to 82, I think. Because he came to Temple in 82.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think he was there for almost about 10 years. Yeah.
So what did the people need to know? You know what I'm saying?
Man, I mean, again, I think another element of this is talking about his work, and like him and another person that people forget about is C. Vivian Stringer, who was, if not, we know about Pat Summitt and folk and Gino from Connecticut, but was one of the best women's basketball coaches of all time, and they both were at Cheney during the same time, winning Division II championships with no scholarships. Think about that. They were winning both won a Division II championship with no scholarships. Now, this is after John Chaney left Gratz and went to Cheney to coach.
Yeah.
So he's coached at a all black and brown school, went to HBCU, won, with no scholarship folks, and then went to Temple. The important thing about that is a conversation we've had a lot, and the conversation I just think is more important than ever now, which is, seeing HBCUs as a part of the landscape of education in this country, and not just like the place we used to have to go or the place that you go if stuff isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important reframing of just education. At some juncture, we could talk about the money that Apple and just put into creating an ecosystem down in Atlanta on the AUC, as well as some money they put in Birmingham for the colleges there. Because I think the world understands now, and tech understands actually, that HBCUs are a huge hotbed of talent. And they've been a hotbed of talent, not just because Vice President Harris went to Howard. It's always been like that, right? This is where the best of the black community was attending school. And I just think it's important to think about him in the context of HBCUs to be taking, again, people who were not coming to school to play basketball and making them and helping them become winners.
Yeah.
Right? Like him and C. Vivian Stringer. And I always, like I said, I want to always mention her name because she's not lifted up enough, to use the current language. We don't lift her up enough. We don't talk about like what she did and what she really represented to coaching, right? She now coaches Edinburgh. Yeah, Rutgers rather. She went to Edinburgh. She coaches Rutgers.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, just again, I think it's just part of his life, and it's part of a unique element of life that he's had, and we should honor. And it doesn't have to be the end of every individual, but we should all think about like not how do we mimic what someone else did, but what do we do to, kind of continue to enhance those things that are happening, that happened well? How do we take from those experiences and continue to scale it and continue to, kind of do well in the legacy of those who have set a precedent?
All right. So I'll add this, and my closing thought would be, it really matters that you, that whatever role you play in the world, that if you want certain, service outcomes and values and things to be furthered, you got to put them into what you do, and that you have standards and expectations, and that you see. And I think it's really important for our community to be honest about that. We see the bigger impact or the broader concern with the certain decisions that we make or choices that we're pushing for, things that we're pushing for, right? So if we're saying, when I talk about education, for me it's about I know that for young men to take care of themselves and to become the men they need to have an understanding of how to learn and how to acquire information and then how to act on it. And if that pathway as I see it, is not healthy, you will be you're gonna miss the note. People will be able to either take advantage of you, or you're gonna miss opportunities because what you think is at play or is at stake with certain choices. Will lead you to make not the best choices. And the idea that I have an obligation to you and a care and a concern for you, even if I don't necessarily know you, is still a value that I think is prominent and important. And I think it's a value that men like John Chaney used to advocate, right? Like, I'm not just doing this for me, even if in something where I may be, framed in the media as sort of, damn, John Chaney out here banging on, yeah, he's wilding out on people. But part of the reason he's doing that, he's acting that way, he's going that hard about it, is the other side of the risk that, it may not be captured in the words that he said in that press conference or in that particular interaction, but he knew exactly what was at stake.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? When folks were being denied opportunity, or if, and he quietly experienced that, as no matter how talented I was and how good I was and how hard I worked, people still found a way to attempt to at least not let me flourish. And I won't let it happen to nobody else without a fight. Like, I'm gonna say something. You know what I'm saying? If I see you trying to stop somebody else from getting the opportunity to flourish. So always we'll have love, respect, and thanks. You know what I mean? John Chaney for that. So that's my closing thought. Anything?
No, just give people their flowers when they're here. Think about what people are doing when they're here, and how we can add on to it. Right? Not we can memorialize, but it's best to take from the example and do something more with it.
Indeed. All right. So with that, I'm gonna say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, I'm Majestic. Thank you to you for listening. Much love and respect to John Chaney, his family, everybody that whose lives he impacted positively, and the many men of his generation, who, quite frankly, I am beholden to for being here. The Ask Your Oldhead Podcast and Good Brothers is a independent production created by me, Justice Rajee. You can support the podcast by 1, listening, 2, subscribing, 2, sharing with someone you love. Further, if you want to financially contribute to the podcast, find us on Patreon. You can Cash App, at Justice Rajee. That's my name. Put the little cash thing on the front. Hit a brother off. But in any event, those things are all minor and inconsequential. Looking into the future of the year, I hope that you enjoyed the conversation on Mangrove as we further elevate the reality of global blackness. We're going to move through that and other topics and other, pieces of art and creation that bring that to the fore. Thank you for listening. Peace.